Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining this Good Ideas webinar focused on social and emotional health. My name is Becca Dray, and I'm Good Reason Houston's Director of District Support. Good Reason Houston exists to accelerate public school improvement across Houston. We believe that every child in every neighborhood deserves access to a world-class public school education. And we know that mental health is especially important right now, given the many different events over the last 18 months. COVID disruptions to education that we've experienced over the past year and a half is just one of those challenges. As teachers and students return to the classroom this year, they're navigating complexity like never before. How do I socialize with my peers? I haven't seen them for a year, for 2 years. How do I learn again in person? Am I safe? These are just a few questions students across the country may be asking themselves. Teachers are experiencing these same uncertainties as well. We've gathered some experts here today, and we're very grateful for them to share their experiences of how to help us navigate and deal with the stress and what resources are available to make sure students and educators stay mentally and socially healthy. Joining us for this discussion is Daniel Knoll, a Momentous School Principal with Momentous Institute, and Kelly Munger, partner with FuelEd. I'll start by introducing Daniel. Momentous Institute believes with strong social emotional health, every child, no matter their circumstances, can defy the odds and change the trajectory of their lives. They work side by side with children, families, and communities to build and repair social emotional health through education, therapeutic services, research, and training so all children can achieve their full potential. Daniel joined Momentous in 2017 and is now Momentous' school principal. He began his career as a Teach for America Corps member in Dallas and has dedicated that career to the integration of education and social emotional health. When he's not navigating how to lead a school during a pandemic, which props to you, he's spending time with his newborn twins, very busy, and trying to spend as much time as he can outside. Thanks, Daniel, for being here today. Kelly, we're so excited to have you here today. FuelEd is a nonprofit that develops emotionally intelligent educators who create relationship-driven schools. And they are one of very few providers that focus on adult social emotional competency as a foundation for school and student outcomes. Through workshops, webinars, Empathy School, and their whole educator collective, they develop resilient, trauma-informed educators who are equipped to support their students. So as you can see, we're very excited today to have student-facing supports and staff-facing supports as we navigate all of this together. Kelly is a partner at FuelEd who spent her career as an advocate for trauma-sensitive mental health approaches in education. As a licensed mental health provider, Kelly loves bridging her expertise in the well-being with FuelEd support to educators. She lives in Atlanta with her husband, who has been an educator for 21 years, and her 3 amazing teenagers. So thank you both for being here today. We are so grateful for you to join this conversation. Daniel, I'd love to first start with a few questions for you. Yeah. The first set of questions about supporting our students. Daniel, can you tell us a little bit about what are the most common needs you're seeing surfacing from your students? How did you identify those needs? And what are some of your resources and tools for responding to those needs?
Yeah, Becca, thank you for the introduction. And Kelly, it's a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon too. I'm going to be taking notes during your section because staff definitely needs as much support as possible right now. So Becca, your question about students. So how did we figure out what their needs were coming back to school, right? And so what's sort of the reality, what's happening, and how are we responding to it? Before I dive in too much, I work in an elementary school. So if there's folks listening that are elementary school teachers right now, woo, good to see you. But if you're middle and high school, hopefully something that I say will translate or sort of pass over to your setting as well, because we're working with kids and there may be similar things that you're noticing. I think one of the biggest things that we've noticed so far is the social element of school, right? And so for such a long time, children were learning in their homes, in their living rooms, by themselves through screens. And it was really challenging to bring that social element to the learning process, right? And so much of how we learn is through interaction, right? Interacting with our peers, building, playing, experiencing together. And when we brought our students back to campus, we noticed an awkward or eerie quiet, which was strange, right? Third graders are very chatty. They love to talk, and they were very quiet. They almost didn't know how to interact with one another again, or they were sort of timid or shy. Like, can I get close to somebody, or am I going to get sick immediately? Right. And so there was some educating about how to safely be around other people, and really a lot of work explicitly on how to collaborate, right? How to listen, how to share your ideas, and how to be heard were skills that our teachers had to explicitly teach to children, right? So as much as we're teaching reading and math and social studies, they were also teaching the skills of how to be people, right? How to interact and coexist in a classroom. So that's one thing, right? And part of like how to do that, and we're still seeing it now, right? We're still seeing that in this current situation because they went home for the summer and we came back and thought we were done with this, right? Like raise your hand, we thought we were moving on, and we aren't. And so it's still some of those same concepts and skills of I can safely work with other people, and here's how to do that. Modeling is a big one too, right? How we as adults model collaboration and model listening skills. Kids are noticing those things constantly. And so a lot of it's the intentional work, scaffolding and building what we hope is true for kids, because we know it takes practice. Yeah.
That's really helpful. And to me, what it sparks is perhaps something that we took for granted around students feeling comfortable interacting with each other, sort of that child freedom that comes with interacting. I think feels definitely an area that you guys have identified to support going forward.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about the family needs, Daniel, that have surfaced in your school community.
Yeah.
Similar to your student needs, how did you identify those needs and respond?
Yeah. And some of these kind of overlap. So they're for adults and also for children. Can I say one other thing about kids first before I
Please
move on?
do. Yes.
Routine and consistency right now are two of the most important things for children. Knowing what's coming, especially in a world where there was so much inconsistency and unexpected, as much as schools can be a safe and routine place for children, then they can feel like they know what's going to happen, right? They feel respected in that way, and they feel like they can plan ahead and know what's coming. And that really helps also for adults, right? I bet Kelly's going to agree later, like adults need that same level of consistency. And that also leads over to families, right? Families need consistency from school. They need clear communication about, right? When families really want to know what's happening. So much of school feels like it's closed off right now, right? The idea of schools being this inviting space for other people is tough, right? We don't want a lot of other visitors and stuff in our spaces. So how are we sharing out for families what's happening? And especially around if there's safety concerns, if there's a positive case on campus, families really want to be in the know. And the more proactive that schools and school leaders can be, how clear you can be in your communication, right? Making sure it's consistent and people know what to expect when something happens, makes everybody breathe just a little bit easier.
Yeah.
And I think the second thing that families are really looking for right now is a level of encouragement. It's a level of reassurance. I've heard from a lot of families this sort of heightened level of stress or worry. Like, is my child behind? Am I as a parent doing enough? And I've only had my daughters for 4 months, and I worry about that all the time. Like, am I doing enough for them? And the idea that schools can be a space to reflect back to families, you are, right? You're doing everything you can and it's working, right? And so reflecting back to families, we didn't lose an entire year, right? We grew as people. We learned incredible skills. Families learned incredible skills, and we're using those to move forward, in my opinion, in a better way, right? We are closer together because we've been sort of teaching and living in each other's living rooms in a lot of ways through this pandemic. And the idea that when we share with parents the strengths and help them feel that sense of accomplishment and that self-efficacy, we're seeing that translate to a lot of pride, but also confidence, right? In moving forward, especially as we're so unsure necessarily of what's coming next.
Yeah, I thank you for shifting. I'm noticing that you've shifted the narrative a bit, right? I think we can't deny that a year, 18 months of interrupted learning has many negative consequences. However, I hear like the optimism in your voice and in your messaging to your students, to your families of like, we've gotten through a really hard time together and now we get to rejoin stronger than before. So thank you for that messaging. For the educators listening, Daniel, I'm curious if you can give us some examples of what consistency looks like on your campus for students and how that comes to life.
Yeah, I think so. One of the pieces we talk a lot about the locus of control, right? And so consistency is oftentimes impacted by things that we don't have any control over, but what can we, right? And so within the classroom, the schedule, the day-to-day routine is very much within sort of teachers' control, as long as I don't change the schedule on them, which I'm trying not to do, but it happens sometimes. But as building that consistent routine, and one of the ways we start every day in every classroom is through a morning meeting. And in that, the teachers have a space to check in with students and also go over what's happening in the day. And that space of knowing what's coming first in my day and knowing that right at the beginning, they're going to talk about what I'm experiencing throughout the course of the day. If something changes, I know about it at 8 o'clock, not what it happens in the moment at 1:10, right? So that kind of pre-work with kids makes a huge difference. Mm-hmm. I think the second thing in terms of consistency is in how we provide feedback to students, right? The idea that how we're interacting, knowing that if let's say I make a mistake and the teacher is consistent in their response, right? Celebrating mistakes, learning from them and growing from them helps children, again, kind of calm the nerves around that. And again, that's within our control. How we respond to children in those moments, totally within our control. So it's those kinds of small moments each day that add up to make a really big difference for children.
Thanks for those two examples. Yeah. Kelly, I'd love to pick your brain a bit as well. Tell us, we're going to shift from students to teachers and school staff. Similar to the question I asked Daniel, let's think about staff needs. We know that school building, the school experience is only as strong as the amazing educators that are in classrooms every day with kids. How do we identify staff needs? And how do you respond to them in this crazy time where we're asking teachers to do more than we've ever imagined?
Yeah, that's a great question. So at FuelEd, we do a lot of listening through phone calls, surveys, qualitative interviews, and we actually partner this year with Teach Plus, which is an amazing organization. We asked 500 teachers, how are you? What do you need? And really, not surprisingly, across the board, what we've learned is teachers are tired. And I live with a teacher, so I do feel like I'm kind of living that in my home of having this feeling of pride that my partner of 21 years is a dedicated, committed educator, and seeing him also leave it all out on the field last year and the year before. And so I think that, really the bottom line, the question to ask yourself if you're in a space to lead teachers is, are you listening? Are you asking? Are you curious? And then when teachers do open up and go to vulnerable places, are you able to mirror that experience back to them? Versus trying to cheer them up or fix it or immediately jump to problem solving. Because I think that what teachers really need, and actually I think, Daniel, I think you're speaking to this from the student perspective, is that after all that we've been through, right, our bodies launched this amazing surge capacity to deal with all the stress of the last 18 months. But we ran out of that surge capacity about 14 months ago. And so what you have is just a whole lot of exhaustion and really a need to digest all of it. It's really shocking if you think about how we haven't really done a great job, I don't think, in education of designing intentional spaces that are slow, that are safe, where educators can make sense of what this has been like and really, really digest it, be there for each other, listen to each other, talk about it. To be able to tell that story and to make sense of it is part of how our brain creates a little hook to hang it on, so that it's not just living in our bodies as exhaustion or as numbness, or as even physical pain. And so that's part of what we've been hearing is just, we want safe space to digest this.
This comment around we don't often design our school spaces as slow spaces. That really sticks with me because of the urgency that I think we all feel to serve our students and make sure that they don't fall behind, right? I think all of those sentiments can sometimes cloud our vision to this need to slow down. You all are supporting some really important work in a partner district in the Houston area, making that intentional space for educators to slow down, to connect, to digest the work. Share a little bit about those empathy circles, your empathy circle approach, and for educators and for folks that are just looking for ways to digest difficult experiences.
Right. So empathy circles are a beautiful, really a result of needs that arose early in the pandemic. And Danielle, I really agree with you that although it's been traumatic and stressful for much of the world, as we move forward, there are these beautiful ways that we are together in a new way. And I am optimistic about that. And so empathy circles are just a therapeutic experience that we offer educators to really sit together and to share what their current experience is like, whatever they need to bring, right? So a struggle, even a problem, or simply how they are feeling or how regulated or not they are that particular day. We bring a group of educators together to simply listen to each other. And the idea is that these spaces are very well held by one of our facilitators our trainers are amazing. But what we hear from our participants is that they come in dysregulated, stressed, feeling harried, hurried, unsafe, and they leave feeling that sense of calm, regulated. We really want educators to walk away from an experience with us to say, I feel safe, I feel understood, I feel seen. And so it's really simple, right? Empathy circles are not magical or complex.
Yeah.
Really just listening and giving that experience of empathic mirroring, like, oh, that does sound hard. Is something that is simple, but is missing often. And like you said, we haven't designed intentional space for that.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like similarly, Daniel, at Momentous, that space is designed for students. And so I hope we can see that connection around, just because there may be an age difference between our students and our staff, there's the opportunity to create similar spaces that address the need to feel heard, seen, and listened to. So that connection is really standing out for me.
Yeah.
Beyond. Oh, go ahead, Kelly.
Sorry, Becca. I'll add one more thing there, that a rule of thumb that we use in therapy sometimes is just, okay, if this child has spent a year outside of an experience of safety, that's 2 to 4 months of time that they'll need to reclaim a sense of safety. And To be honest, I don't know if that's really backed by science. It's more of like our wisdom that we have collectively as therapists. And so if we just use that rule of thumb with ourselves as educators and with our students, then we can say that we've got, we need a school year. If you consider it to be almost 2 years of stress, then that would be 4 to 8 months of time to just feel safe and slow. And like you said, Daniel, to reestablish structure, reestablish routine, and help our students and our staff to bounce back.
Yeah. Thinking about routine again, Daniel, I know some of the messaging that you're giving to your parents is around like, we can do this. You supported your student in ways perhaps never before in their learning at home time. What other tips are you giving to your families as their students are reintegrating back into the school experience?
Yeah. I think so we talk about how the partnership between school and home it needs to be strong, right? When that relationship exists, it's really some really positive outcomes happen for children. So one of the things at Momentous that we've tried to really encourage parents to do is to check in on themselves and their own well-being, right? Teachers are exhausted, children are figuring this all out, and parents are tired too, right? And it's been really challenging to make sure that, down to the basics of like making sure there's food on the table, right? There's families that have really had to navigate some very challenging circumstances through all of this and have given every bit of themselves to make sure that their children are well off. And so we try and make a space for families to say, like, how are you doing, right? And what is it that you need right now? We talk a lot about, there's a metaphor that we use here at Momentous, the idea of the oxygen mask in the airplane, right? They tell you to put it on first. And so much time as parents is spent putting the mask on for our children. As a school, and then through our social workers and through our therapists and work like that, we really do try and make sure families have a chance to check in on themselves. And that's part of where that encouragement lands, is to say, like, you are making it happen, right? And we see it. We at the school see how hard you are working to make all this happen. It has been a really tricky time, and schools have asked a lot of families, right? Families are asking lots of schools, but schools are also asking lots of families. Like, if you think about it, if a kid in the classroom tests positive and all of a sudden 3 kids are home for 2 weeks, like, that is an incredibly challenging situation for families, especially those who are working in those frontline jobs. So really it's about listening too, right? What are the concerns that parents have, and building space to hear them is sort of all that kind of wrapped into one.
Yeah.
We also spend a lot of time with mindfulness practices here at Momentous. We teach children about the power of breathing and what parts of their brain work to control what parts. And it also makes a big difference for adults, right? So what we teach children, we also offer to our families, so that when their kid says, Mom, you need to settle your glitter while you're driving, the parents know what that's about, right? And they can use those same tools that we use with students. Our parents use them as well. I use them. So
yeah. And I'm such a tactical gal. What does that look like for parent interaction? Is there kind of a monthly get together with parents on campus? Are there newsletters? Just trying to generate ideas for other educators in the room of how to really strengthen that connection between the school and home.
Yeah. Yes, and right. There's newsletters. There's school-wide ones, which I could be more consistent about as I'm listening. It's really, I think a lot of it stems from the classroom. I think that parents want to hear from the classroom and from the classroom teachers as much as possible, right? I can share high-level things about what's happening at the school, but they want to know day to day, like, what's the experience of the child. A lot of our teachers will use things like Instagram, like a private account, to share with families during the day how kids are doing, and the pride that kids show, like, I got to put my work on the Instagram page. Like, again, it's another way to motivate and incentivize. We do hold a lot of like open spaces. Tomorrow I'm holding a monthly coffee and chat that we do, and I'm holding it at 4 different times throughout the day, some on Zoom, some on campus. So we're having to really sort of redesign the work because there's so many time commitments that people have. And now that we have access to technology, we can do things like join at lunch from where you're working. Like, why not? There's no reason you have to necessarily be at school to be plugged into what's happening. So it's those kinds of things. We're taking advantage of what we've learned to, pull forward and to keep using what worked. So, yeah.
Thank you for those examples. Kelly, I think we touched on this a bit as you shared kind of the nuts and bolts of what an empathy circle looks like. Beyond that, how might schools make more space for rethinking and adjusting professional development opportunities, specifically to address teacher needs, but then also to think about, like, how do we build skill? How do we build the capacity for folks to be able to address student challenges, maybe their own challenges with social and emotional health, but then also student challenges?
Yeah, it's great. Great question. That's what we exist to answer this question at FuelEd. And so we think about it a lot and we're really passionate. And one thing that came from the Teach Plus survey was this very simple but powerful idea, which is that we can make professional development a therapeutic experience. And it's sort of mind-blowing if you spend a lot of time in the education professional.
I'm thinking back. I'm thinking back to my professional development.
Right, because frankly, a lot of teachers see professional development as something that is sometimes awesome, but a lot of times annoying or draining or a time suck. Or actually what we hear a lot is that PD is a time where I'm asked to do yet another thing. Learn a new system that we'll throw away next year. And so what we do, and I'll just use our flagship training, the Whole Educator Collective. We actually take 3 days. Actually, we're doing 2 days right now. Before the pandemic, it was 3 days. But it's a retreat style experience where educators are essentially diving into the science, the skills, and I think here's the really therapeutic part, the self-awareness of relationships. And so what we do at the Whole Educator Collective is actually help an educator explore their own attachment story at their own pace, and how that story shows up for them in the present day, in the classroom, in their interpersonal relationships, and their professional relationships, and of course, their relationships with students. And one thing we've learned through our research with educators is this one theme that comes up over and over again, which is that, and this actually relates to mindfulness, Daniel, but after the Whole Educator Collective experience and diving into your own story, right? And so that's really a form of mindfulness, is being able to notice what your own experience and story is. You began to see not only your spouse, your teenage daughter who's driving you crazy, but also your students and your professional peers through the lens of their story. And so it's this idea of collective mindfulness, right? When I'm able to apply awareness and compassion to my own story, that is therapeutic, right? I begin to understand myself. And because of how the brain works, that often easily jumps to and translates to how I view others. I view others with more compassion, with more empathy, with more nuance, with more perspective, with more willingness to say, that behavior really gets on my nerves, but also I wonder what the story behind that behavior is. And so using professional development as an opportunity for educators to grow their emotional intelligence is sort of revolutionary in a sense. It's a lot of people are doing it. But we have this time set aside and we know it's important. And we know that when educators grow in emotional intelligence, they do become more regulated. They become more calm. They become better at putting on the oxygen mask, at seeking care, at seeking help, setting boundaries. And so that kind of calm and regulation is absorbed by students. And like you said, internal locus of control, like I can't control what's happening outside of this 1 hour space I have with these kids. But if I can show up as a calm, secure, regulated adult, that's going to have a cascading effect on my classroom. And so that's how we advocate change in PD, is to make it an experience where teachers walk away and they're like, I feel seen, I feel more aware. I feel self-aware. And I have some new skills.
Yeah. Have you seen beyond the retreat? Do you have anecdotes, examples of how schools have really taken that experience and then embedded it in their work going forward? I think often humans are great. We did it. We did that experience. We're done with it. We also know that that's not how development works. It's a muscle that we need to come back to over and over again. Any advice on how to embed it into future PD experiences outside of the retreat experience?
Absolutely. I'm so glad you asked. Yeah. So we've been asking that question too, right? Because we have discovered that through years of research, teachers are like, that was amazing. I changed so much. My inner life transformed. My family is different. But we want more. I need to have that repeated experience. I need for my culture to be, my school culture to be as empathic and aware as what I experienced. And so we've been really working, and again, the pandemic actually, by making all of us more comfortable with online interaction, such as what we're doing right now, created more connectivity between educators that we could provide repeated offerings, right? So we call it repeated resonance at FuelEd. With this idea that you got this experience in the initial training or PD, and here are repeated experiences of that. So empathy circles are an example, but another practice that we use internally that we've started to translate externally is called stewardship. And so this is simply being paired with another educator, and it's a peer-based therapeutic experience. So it's free, it's scalable, and really what you need is that initial training to learn how to provide empathic mirroring, which is a key skill that we teach at FuelEd. And once you have that, you can begin to be a mirror to a peer, and really you just take turns, making sure that you're okay and really putting the oxygen mask on with each other, right? Seeing it as not a solitary experience, but something we do together collectively for each other. Yeah. And so I think what we've seen through right now, we're running a group of fellows through the stewardship experience. And what they would say is that this experience of knowing I get some time every week to unload the burden of being an educator with someone who gets it because they're also an educator has been transformative, right? Because I'm not alone with this. And I actually have I prioritize the time and space to be able to really just regulate myself through this one conversation. Again, it's simple. Yeah. But it's the same report we get with empathy circles. I went in so stressed out and I came out feeling understood. And that ability to regulate is a cycle, right? And it's the one we want all of our students to learn. But we as educators, and I do self-identify as an educator, we are often really great helpers and fixers. We are really good at giving care, but receiving care is much, much harder.
Yeah. I think that what you're highlighting, Kelly, is the power of an authentic relationship, which, that has that healing power. And Daniel, it brought me back to something you were talking about earlier about reminding kiddos about like, you are safe to enter into a classroom and build and rebuild relationships with your peers. In what ways have you, what strategies do you have to give to educators, Daniel, around like, how do we help kids reattach to each other again? Or what have your teachers been doing in their classrooms to help them build those skills?
Yeah. I mean, the first word is play, right? Like there's ways to, kind of trick children into thinking that they're playing a game and they're still learning all at the same time, right? Like kids, that's what your teachers are doing. The idea of like, there's ways so often to like to gamify learning, right? And that's so much responsive to what kids are experiencing right now. Like they love the idea of designing and interacting and playing in this game kind of world. And so a lot of our learning and resources comes through that, right? Like a lot of our math experiences are playing games together. And the children, they're practicing these skills and these content, expectations while also playing with one another, right? Following rules and helping each other and figuring out how to reach a goal together really helps build that interaction. And I talked earlier about the morning meetings, but in those is a chance for children to share, right? As Kelly was saying, like being heard and sharing about your weekend or what your new dog's name is, or all these things. And children will tell you. They will tell you.
Don't we all? I think we all want to share, right? Right. Let me tell you, I got a kitten.
I want to get my dog right now.
and see, and then I know something about you, right? And then I find connections and experiences. I did some things in the classroom when there was a tough relationship. I would make children find things they had in common, and then I have them find things in common that they disliked, right? So this idea of finding connection with one another, oftentimes they just didn't necessarily see themselves in somebody else, right? So it's those explicit moments where, you and I might know how to build a relationship with somebody. We ask questions, we listen, we take turns. That's hard for a 6-year-old. And that takes a lot of practice and working towards it. And it takes time every day. And so, as much as right now there's this priority, like we're saying, for academics, we also know that when children feel like they've got friends in class and that the teacher cares about them, they're willing to work a lot harder. And so that, time on the front end and time each day has a multiplying effect on your classroom, on your community. And honestly, it makes the work a lot more fun. So.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I wanted that stuck out to me around the urgency around academic recovery. To me, what I'm hearing about your school community is that there's an urgency about human recovery so that we can access academic recovery. I think it's a really hard, the pressure is immense in many ways to ensure that all things kind of right size themselves, but there seems to be kind of a stepping stone approach that you're taking. So
yeah, and I think they're not mutually exclusive, right? I mean, I think the kind of academic learning we'd really like to see is play. It is exploration. It is light. It's a light burden when a student feels safe. And that we can apply that in a million different ways. And I think it's the same for educators too. They want to play and be safe.
Yeah, that's totally agree there. It sounds like you guys have a lot of kind of tools in your toolkit around what are different ways to access this human connection, whether it's through morning circles or morning meetings, whether it's through learning the science of how our brains work and mind, how do we actually regulate ourselves through mindfulness, the science of relationships. Are there any, I'm mentioning all of the cool things that I have written down and now I want to look up and dig into further. Are there any key resources or learning opportunities that you have found really beneficial, whether it's for, Daniel, for your teachers? Has there been an activity that they've really enjoyed, or even your students? And Kelly, I know your shop is all about those tools and toolkits, but yeah, I would love to hear if there's any final resources to share with the listeners today.
Kelly, do you want to go first?
Sure. Well, obviously our website, fueledschools.org, we have a lot of content there, just blog, and we have a lot of free community events. And so just one of the tools would be to engage in an experience like an empathy circle or the stewardship experience, or one of our trainings or one of our community gatherings or webinars, to have that experience as an educator of both just the calm and regulation, like you mentioned, but also the chance to connect with a wider sense of identity around being an educator and wanting to be an emotionally intelligent educator. And so I think it's really about engagement and connecting with other like-minded people. So yeah, our website is full of these resources and fun tools. You can take an attachment quiz. You can take all kinds of things like that.
Cool. Yeah, I think you're right. It's not necessarily about the book you read or the article you read or the professional development you attend. It's the connections with other folks with similar experiences. So that's a great point. Daniel, any resources to
I will
share?
also plug our website, momentusinstitute.org. We have our blog that's updated constantly, teacher strategies, resources for adults. We also have podcasts, we have trainings. We've also taken advantage of the webinar style things. We've got cohorts of folks that are learning together. So definitely check that out. There's also, we've got a lot of resources that we've built that we're actually selling. We have an online store. So a lot of the things that we use here in our classrooms, like a calm down box or different strategies to use for morning circles, we have all of those for sale on our website. So that's the little plug for that.
Yeah, thanks.
We all need a calm down box,
right? It's really, we did a lot of building your own at home while we were on distance learning. So you can find anything you want. It can be part of your calm down box. So yeah. Yep.
Well, I want to say thank you to you both. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Daniel, for participating in this important discussion and for sharing your knowledge and expertise. I peppered you guys with questions, and you were great at going with the flow here. And thank you to everybody that listened in. I know life is incredibly busy, and we're really grateful to spend some time with you today. You can find more ideas about our Good Ideas webinar series, including a recording of this episode on our website. And yeah, we just want to thank you for listening.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. All righty. Bye-bye, everybody.